24th, 2004, I lost my baby. In fact, it was I who ended my baby's life. I was 19 weeks pregnant. It was a choice, and it was hard. It was a loss that I still cannot explain to anyone fully, even those closest to me. The decision was made to end the pregnancy to save my baby from living an existence. Her prognosis was not good. She would require 2 surgeries right after birth to survive. That was if she survived to birth. She would be in a wheelchair, physically handicapped, mentally handicapped, with no bowel or bladder control. To me, this was the right thing to do, to save her from this type of pain and suffering. My genetics counselor talked to me and told me it often helped in the grief to know the sex and even name the baby. So I did, and she was very right. I am forever grateful to that genetics counselor for the gift she gave me and encouraging me to find out the sex and name my baby. The day of the procedure was the most difficult and traumatic day of my entire life. When they finally came to wheel me to the OR, I was shaking. I was so scared. I have never been so afraid in my life. I'm not going to have her there anymore. She won't be part of me. Am I making a mistake? Am I being selfish? Will it hurt for her? Maybe the doctors are wrong. So much was going through my mind. They wheeled me to the OR and left me. Left me outside the OR on a gurney by myself, alone. Alone to listen to them prepping the room, talking to each other. As to them, it was just another day at work. What did I do? I talked to my daughter. I put my hand on my belly and I talked to her. I told her I would never forget her and I was sorry. And most importantly, that I loved her and always would. I buried Kylie in my grandmother's grave, and we held a small graveside service to say goodbye. I will never forget the minister telling me how great he thought it was that we were doing this service, that years ago so many women never got the chance to say goodbye to their babies, and many of them didn't even get to see their deceased babies. And that was it. That was the end of those moments in time. But let me tell you, Kylie is as much a part of me as any of my children are. She is a part of me, and when she died, a part of me died. It changed me. I'm a different person because of her. The story of Kylie never really ends, though. I parent her beyond the grave. I'd already heard about these flyers and these images being on the streets of London because I'm part of a Facebook group that is a community group, and everybody was so upset about these images being dropped into the mailbox. It took me back to 2012. I had come home and I got this flyer, this horrific images in my mailbox, and it literally sent me into a tailspin mentally. I had had a termination for medical reasons in 2004. To take that image out of your private mailbox, I literally thought somebody had put it there for me specifically to shame me, saying, I know you had an abortion, look what you did to your baby, that kind of thing. And it put me into a depression. It was very, very hard. My loss was very difficult on me. It was very traumatizing. Fast forward to 2020, and I'm reading it, they're back. These images are back. They're putting them in mailboxes. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, what if I get one? And I was afraid in my own home. A friend of mine lived down the street, and she messaged me. And she's like, Katie, they're on our street. They're putting them in mailboxes. And I was so upset. I was so afraid. I was literally like, what am I going to do? And I was like kind of shaking. And I'm like, what am I going to do? You know, this is not okay. They're taking it upon themselves to put these images into people's private mailboxes where children can get them, where people who have gone through pregnancy loss like myself can pull them out and look at these awful images. And so I kind of went outside, and before they even got to my mailbox, I saw them walking up. And this isn't Canada Post. They won't deliver these images, okay? These are private citizens, part of a specific group that hand deliver these. And so I went out and I confronted them. So the police come along, and he's just basically like, you know, what's going on? And I said, they're putting these pamphlets in private citizens' mailboxes. And basically he was like, well, you know, obviously to this woman, you're not wanted here, you know. And I said to the police officers, do you want the pamphlets? Because you could have them back. He goes, no, that's okay. You know, I mean, these images traumatize even first responders. You know, they see a lot on the street. We have no idea. Then my mind kind of turned to what can be done. And I said this, well, something's got to be done. This has to be illegal. I mean, this is just crazy, and I started talking to some people in the legal community and started just kind of fact gathering information. And somebody said to me, sometimes you just can't change it. I'm like, fuck that. We're going to change it, so this is ridiculous. So it wasn't just me. I mean, these are hundreds of people, thousands of people in this city. So I gathered some like-minded individuals, and the Viewer Discretion Legislation Coalition was born. First initial conversations that the VDLC started having was research. We got to figure out, where's this happening? Soon to find out it's happening across this country. What's the history of these pamphlets? Found that out. Is there any case law? Is there anything that's, have they been charged before? If they have, what happens? So we did a lot of research online. But in the meantime, I started writing letters. I started writing to city councilors. I started writing letters to MPPs. I started writing letters to MPs. I was every level of government. You heard from me. So I didn't know what's the angle, right? Which way do we go here? What level of government should this be under?
I recall being at my old office on Central Ave and receiving one of the pamphlets. And I remember being very upset about it. And I remember thinking some of my clients that have been vulnerable in terms of my practice in family law, my work within the community, my knowledge of just the vulnerable sector in London. I've done consults for the Abused Women's Centre. And I know that pregnancy and loss and medical issues are a highly complex area. It's not a black and white thing. One of the things that Katie and I have talked about is the similarities with the approach that this group is taking with respect to, for example, hate speech. Whenever an organization that has an agenda of hate speech, they don't start with hate. They never start with hate. They start with an emotionally charged subject that is designed to invoke emotion out of the person seeing it, which brings that person's guard down, and they're not able to look at the information on a rational perspective. And that is really scary. In terms of the charter, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, absolutely, that's a charter right. But the first part of a charter also says that there can be reasonable limits, and if it's demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. So what we have to look at is, again, just for the lack of a better example, let's look at hate speech. People have a right to speech, but when that speech is directed toward hate for another group, the harm that it could cause society is much greater than the limit imposed on that subject, and that's why it was lawfully limited.
Well, I was so impressed right from the beginning, because these signs have been around for a long time, and they've been annoying people for a long time, and they've been causing harm in the community for a long time. But here was finally a group that was going to organize in a systematic way to try to press the law as far as the law could go in terms of protecting people from these unwanted images. And it was just really refreshing to see that there was a group that was evidence-based, people who were very, very familiar with the subject matter, come together to try to do something about it. I recall receiving questions about whether it was okay for people to go door to door. The answer to that is yes, it's okay for people to go door to door. What about the message? Are there messages protected by the Constitution, by freedom of expression? And yes, they are. I mean, what this group was doing was, it was lawful under the current law, and it was protected by 2B, freedom of expression of the Canadian Charter. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. And that created certain problems, not insurmountable, because in Canada, which we'll get to in more detail, just to raise the claim of 2B, freedom of expression, is not the end of the discussion. There's a whole nother level of analysis that you have to go through, which people often miss. the Oakes test, which, remember, the Oakes test analysis is derived from Section 1, free and democratic society, demonstrably justifiable. It only arises if an aggrieved party is able to make out that there has been a constitutional violation on its face. There are 4 parts to the Oakes test. The first part requires the government agency to show that there is a legitimate and substantial objective for enacting the allegedly offending measure. Once you satisfy that prong, and the burden is on, in this case, the city, or if it's the federal government, the burden is always on the enacting party to show these. So if the evidence is equal, no, you don't go on to the next stage. Next, you have to show a rational and reasonable relationship between the harm that's being done to the expressive activity and the legitimate objective. They have to be related. Can't be unreasonable, can't be arbitrary, can't be vague. You have to go through an analysis dealing with less restrictive alternatives. Is there a way that you could meet the substantial objectives in a way that has less of an impact on expressive activity? And finally, an overall revisit through proportionality in general, whereas you look at the big picture, and the government would always have the burden, the onus of showing all 4 of these elements.
Then we also, at the same time, these people were on the streets of London with these images, and people were enraged. So I started a Facebook group. I'm telling you, it went from 1 person to 1,800 people like in a week. So people started following us, found out about us. We gathered a team of, we called them the Rapid Response Team, where everybody would have signs in their car, and we would go out and we would counter-protest them. So images that are horrific to see, traumatizing, et cetera, we would block those. So we would kind of stand in front of them with our own signs so that people didn't need to see them. You're driving down the street and you see this on the corner, and that's anybody that's had a stillbirth. Children were seeing it. People have had miscarriages. I mean, it was crazy. We actually started the Rapid Response Team, and we have this messaging system. And if somebody saw a graphic image on the streets of London, I would know about it within, I'd say, half an hour. People would contact me through multiple different means, text. If they know me well, they have my number, or Messenger, or on the Facebook group, they would post. And we had a team, and then anybody that could go out would go out and counter-protest. We counter-protested them pretty hard, to the point where they said that we were wearing them out. I was like, we're wearing you out. You're wearing us out. Why are you even here?
A friend of mine and we had gone to, I think the intersection was Highbury and Oxford in London. And we were out counter-protesting. I'm not sure if I had my big sheet sign or what I had. But Katie was there, and she was very visibly upset, and I was like, oh my God, I hope that girl is on my side, because she is mad. She had taken a Canadian flag, and that's what she had in the car, I think, and she was covering up images as well. So I just knew right away, I'm like, oh, that girl is mad, and she is going to do something about it. She did.
Yeah. So I joined a Facebook group that was, I believe, pro-choice feminism, something along those lines. And Katie had posted shortly after she received the graphic images in the mail, and I had not yet received one to my home address. But I remember having a similar response to Christine of, wow, that's disgusting, and that's really unfortunate that that's going into people's private mailboxes. And Katie, I think, put out something similar to a call to action to people that were also, upset about that and wanted to get together to do something to change it. And so I connected with Katie, and ever since I've been part of VDLC events and counter protests and fundraisers. But my main role is usually responding to those graphic images on the street. They will intentionally cherry pick some of the images that are being used, and as to whether or not they're valid, whether or not they are actual images, I don't know, I wasn't there when they were taken, but I know that there's a lot of physicians that have kind of come forward and shared actual resources of, hey, this is what this actually looks like for an abortion to be performed at 5 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks. I know the Maya Network is a really good resource for that they share legitimate images that have been taken during abortion procedures. And I can assure you that it does not look anything like the images that we are encountering on the streets. So just when you see that sort of disparity being demonstrated, it causes you to wonder a little bit of, hey, where did those images come from and why are they so different from what all of these physicians are very loudly sharing?
We were such a thorn in their side, all of us together, that they called us the London Situation.
Yeah.
Because we were out counter-protesting. They have those really big signs that they would put up on the street corners, and we would go with our sheet signs or whatever else we had to cover them up. We were starting to make changes. We were trying to get into changing the law, so I don't think they'd ever really encountered anybody like our group before, anybody like us before. So we got named the London Situation, and we loved it. We took that on. I think we put it on
hats or something?
Yeah, we put it on something. We were the London Situation. We loved that so much.
As Christine said, the London Situation name or moniker came from the organization that we fight against. We fought so hard here in London. They had never had such pushback that they had from us here in London, that they started calling us the Situation in London, the Situation in London, and they would send more people to London to hit the streets because we were pushing back so hard, and like heads of this organization would come down and go on the streets and be there, and we would be out there in the winter, snowy, blowy, counter-protesting, we don't care. And so we thought that was really funny that we had affected them in this way that was so negative for them, and that they were like really having a hard time keeping up with us. So we started calling ourselves the London Situation. And it stuck.
The advocacy, when people start to reach out saying that they're aware of a concern in the community and bringing it forward to your consideration. As a first-term counselor on the committee that would handle such business, it was balancing what committee work it might come through for process and procedure, but then as a ward counselor, also listening and waiting to hear what my community had to say. Is this on their radar? Are they being affected by it? And then balancing the two, realizing there's never a shortage of things to focus on, but then prioritizing what matters to a few and what matters and resonates in the community. Once you see there is a community need and interest in a bylaw, I know the government can move slowly sometimes. Sometimes it's with caution. In 2020, in November, 4 members of City Council had reached out and put a motion forward for staff to go and investigate, bring it back what a bylaw could look like. What's our bylaw currently doing? What are other municipalities doing as a scan? And looking for any legal proceedings that also might be out there to reference for when that information comes back and the reports did, that we can make informed decisions. This isn't mail that was going through Canada Post. It was mail that was being delivered to their homes as a leaflet without a warning on it of graphic content, and you didn't know who brought it, and there was no one's names attached to it. Part of the idea was, well, can we already do it with no press trespassing, no junk mail stickers? But when it's not coming through Canada Post and you don't know who's doing it, you have no one to go back and track and say, please don't do this, or you violated my sticker and my postings and you came anyways. There was just no accountability of who's out there doing this.
So before the VDLC existed, I was working in the office of the local member of provincial parliament. And there was one day in particular where all of a sudden all of these emails just started pinging through, one after another. And then from then on, it was every day, and it was just continuing to grow and to snowball. And when you work in one of those offices, you get a lot of emails every day, obviously. These were different. They weren't forum emails. They weren't predicted or pre-bought. They weren't from any type of organization. They were sincerely people who had received this kind of material in their mailbox and were genuinely and palpably upset. The emails often were pretty similar. They would be moms who were having trouble getting their kids to go to sleep after seeing the literature. They had had nightmares. They were folks who had some sort of first responder or veteran in their home who had some sort of PTSD that was also activated by seeing this type of literature. And often, I think the most important piece is that it was people that didn't engage with the political process on a regular basis. It was genuine people who were genuinely upset that this, like a mailbox is part of your home, and they were genuinely upset that this sort of thing could be intruding on their home and that the government had nothing to say about that. When Katie reached out and when the VDLC started to form, it gave us an opportunity to take folks who were reaching out and redirect their energy back into something where they could help them build that infrastructure. So a lot of that growth that was happening organically was also being filtered through folks who were trying to engage with the political process and finding that there wasn't any real option available yet. It was very helpful to have a place to send people where they were having the same emotional experience. It was also very helpful to have a place where they were starting to organize, and you could see the bloom of what this group was going to become. They were starting to think about counter-protesting. They were starting to think about canvassing and knocking the doors that those leaflets had been put at. They were starting to see the pieces of what this was going to become.
Back when I first saw them on the news, they were engaging with protesters, they were hiding objectionable and misleading signs. I say misleading because, many believe that those images have been altered. They've been enhanced and they don't represent a typical abortion or aborted pregnancy. They're often as gruesome as possible. Well, when I was first introduced to the movement with Katie, it was incredibly impressive. Like, this is the definition of a grassroots organization that has come together with people who are passionate, people who are caring, people who are looking out for others. We should all be caring for one another and respecting one another and recognizing what are our rights, but also what are boundaries. We need to not only fight for our own rights, but recognize that my rights end where your rights begin. I can't tell you how to lead your life, nor should I. Private members legislation is quite a process. It starts with, an idea, it has this genesis form, and you sort of have an idea of what you'd like to solve, but how you go about solving it can be often very difficult. When crafting any legislation, it has an impact on multiple other pieces of legislation. So, in the drafting stages and the idea stages, you have to think about what the solution is actually going to be. The process of legislation is a lengthy one, and it takes a great deal of time. It starts with an idea, and then it goes into this research mode, and then it has to be drafted in such a way as to be correct and effective. But also, when it comes to tabling it, we worked so incredibly hard to gather signatures to show the government that this was something that they needed to see debated and on the floor of the chamber. And I must commend Katie and VDLC for going to great lengths. So when it was swept off the table, it was deeply disappointing. It's so frustrating that you see the good work that's happened in the community, you see the good work that's happened in many other communities, and how quickly that can all fall away. And that's why I was so proud to introduce it again. But unfortunately, you also have to be realistic with some of these things as well. We can push as hard as we want to try to get the government to listen, but we also have to recognize that they may not be willing. They may have ears and hearts that are closed. Can't ever give up on these changes. I was really pleased that there were certain municipalities, in Ontario that were able to pass bylaws that do this very thing, and it doesn't interfere with people. It allows them to continue to send out their beliefs, but to warn people. And that way people have that choice. They have that option. They can give that consent, or they can, choose not to engage with the material. It just makes good sense for everyone involved. It doesn't hurt anyone in this process. So London really was a leader, and VDLC is a leader because they've brought this, to the forefront in many places. I would love to see this across Ontario.
So they did move forward with a public participation meeting, which was awesome. It was lengthy. It was 4 hours of people in our community speaking, like saying, hey, you know, demonstrable harm is happening here. These people are traumatizing us. We don't want these in our mailbox. Do something. And then obviously there's the other side saying, well, you know, freedom of expression, charter rights. That council really took the time, energy, thoughtful consideration to make this bylaw happen. And I give huge kudos to all of them.
So it did take years to get through, as we did the municipal scans of what other people are doing and ways to move forward that things are still allowed, just with certain guidelines put in place. You went through the process of following proper procedures and process, making sure that you had the public participation meetings, that you had the legal research behind the scenes to make informed decision making, that if there are challenges, that it could stand up, that residents on either side still felt they had a way to have a say what was happening in their homes when they got literature or getting literature to someone.
So in May of 2022, after a lengthy back and forth on this issue, London City Council passed the graphic flyer bylaw. And I watched it on the YouTube channel that they have, that you can watch the council meetings. I cried, quite literally. I cried. I was feeling joy. I was feeling happiness. I was feeling grateful, very grateful for the work that they did, and they took it seriously. And I was feeling like just successful, just like something good just came from all this work. Because trust me when I say I've wanted to quit many times, you know, so finally some change is going to happen. And I just felt very grateful. After London passed the bylaw, it was always on the books that we were going to fly out to Calgary. We flew 3 team members out, me being one of them, and we arranged a meeting with Councillor Jennifer Wyness. And she was so receptive to this plan. And it was in May of 2022, right after the bylaw here had passed, actually. We flew out. We had a great meeting with her and her team. Jen Singer was also there. She was the head of the VDLC out there. I was pretty excited when we had that contact out in Alberta, because I knew I wanted to go there next, you know, because a lot of these images that come from an organization that have 2 main offices. One is in Calgary, one is in Toronto. So we've got the Ontario kind of precedent set. We're hoping for more municipalities in Ontario to follow suit, but Calgary was going to be a big one if we could get that.
You're kind of going into the unknown, and Alberta tends to be a very conservative province, so you're not really sure what you're getting into. But it was a really great experience going and talking with Jen. She's incredible. The whole experience was really great. And I think there was one really, I guess, serendipitous type thing that happened while we were there. Down the street from our hotel room, there were anti-abortion protesters out, and we just happened upon them, and we happened to have signs. So it was a really cool experience to be able to get our signs and go out and protest in Calgary. Because I don't think that a lot of people, I don't know if anybody does that in Calgary. So it was really kind of like a meant to be type moment for us.
So the community that I lived in at the time had a very active social media page. And so I like to refer to it as like, you know how there's like the Santa tracker at Christmas time? You could basically track where the individuals were distributing flyers based on the Facebook page. I was quite upset by the fact that these images were being distributed. And so I started to try and do things at a community level. And at that point, someone else in the community had actually heard of the VDLC London. And so they connected me with Katie. So that was my first introduction to the VDLC, and that kind of stemmed all the rest of the change.
Yeah, so when I first heard about the graphic flyer distribution here in Calgary, I was hearing it from a lot of clients and community members of the charity. I was getting messages like, hey, I got this, and like, this is extremely traumatizing and upsetting, and like, what can we do? Because this is very impactful. And so I was in conversation with community members who had received the flyers, and then my son and I, one summer day, we were decided to go for a walk, and we were leaving my house, and I didn't even see it, but in the siding of my house, so not in the door or anywhere, but in the siding of my house, there was something that was there. I didn't notice. My son was like, "Oh, Mom, what is that?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And so he grabbed it, and then so he looked at. He was probably 8 at the time now, and he looked at it and he was like, "Whoa!" And he gave it to me. And then for the first time, I received it myself. And I was like, whoa, this is not okay for so many reasons. Your home is your safety net. And to have these images come into your own private space like that felt really like an invasion of my own kind of work that I had been doing, and just almost felt like just this trauma dump that I wasn't anticipating or expecting. It doesn't matter if you've personally experienced pregnancy or infant loss, abortion, termination for medical reasons. Those images are just disturbing, and they're more so disturbing for folks who have had a pregnancy or infant loss, because when they show an image of a fetus at 10 weeks. And no matter what the circumstances is, that's going to evoke emotion. And then you see the same image of this is the fetus after abortion, which argumentatively, there's many reasons why people lose a pregnancy, whether it's through abortion, through DNC, through ectopic pregnancies, through various ways, through miscarriage. Those images are sincerely not helpful, and they cause a lot of harm.
It seemed like all of a sudden there was something tangible. I could put my hands on something and say, I can affect change. We had a really big hill to climb. Katie gave me a vision of a guidance and a vision of what we could do. So when we kept getting a no, we kept pushing. When the bylaw in London was passed, it absolutely did give us a form to follow, which allowed the counselors, the council, the lawyers, everyone in Calgary to then have the best opportunity available to them to create a solution based on the challenges that Katie had, especially from a legal level in London.
My first time learning about VDLC was when Jen reached out from the Calgary chapter, and it happened after I was elected to office. And it was almost meant to be in some senses, because the concern that was brought to me was something that I heard while I was door knocking in the community, and I had in the back of my mind of wanting to address is at the time of the campaigning for office, people going around putting the abortion flyers in the doors throughout the same area that I was door knocking at the same time. And I heard from women at the door and families, men, concerned about what had been slid into their door. And that was kind of what led me to want to partner with VDLC at the time. My first thought when we entered into the conversation was it was a reasonable ask, because I'm learning how to govern a city, and I have to balance the needs of many people. I have nearly 100,000 people in my riding and over 1 million people in my city as a whole, that when you're looking through identifying a problem and for a solution, you have to have that give and take of what you're trying to make a policy or govern on. And I found the conversation was one of how do we make sure our entire community feels safe while still respecting that people have a difference of opinion. And I found that was very helpful in working on policy together. And so it was one of those things where precedent was set in one, but where municipal responsibility allows us to govern and write bylaws for what happens on your front door, there was trepidation around it. But yet municipal government does hold that space of writing policies and laws for what can be delivered to your front door. And this was one where I look at it and I found it a great compromise to protect everybody.
Oh, it was so emotional. It was one of those things where I wanted to get excited, but I also had that same reservation of I didn't want to get too excited just in case. It was an absolute emotional roller coaster. What it showed me is when you stand for something and you're willing to get out there and you're willing to say, this is what I stand for, and I'm standing for it, not just for myself, but for other individuals, that change can happen. Real change can be affected in real people's lives.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it was such an amazing feeling. It was this like big sigh of relief of like everybody had been working so hard to get to that point, and it just felt like this big weight kind of came off of our shoulders, a sigh of relief, a big comfort in knowing that people, families, and individuals are not going to continuously be re-traumatized without their consent, without their knowing, in the privacy of their homes. And I remember leaving chambers where media was and the VDLC group was, and we all just like hugged, and it was just this. It was just this moment, because there was also like COVID-19 had separated a lot of us, and it was just this moment of like community. And it was such a powerful thing that when people believe in something that is right, and we stand up together and we work together, what a powerful feeling that was. And I remember that feeling afterwards when we stepped out of chambers to kind of celebrate that moment. It was like a feeling that I won't forget.
I think that too was like, wow, we found a way to get this where everyone agreed, and on a council to get unanimous votes is very difficult. If there wasn't community out there saying we want change, you couldn't make that change. When everyone's telling you, yes, please vote it, please support it, all of our inboxes were filling up with people saying, please support this bylaw. We're the first major city in Canada to do this. Like, we're one of the top, like, for population and size. I think we're up there. And to see that, like, some of the other municipalities as large as us are kind of afraid to touch it when it's something that their constituents actually want. You question, well, why are you not trying to do the best interest of what your community's asking?
There's a lot more work to do, unfortunately. It's hard work, and it's work that you sometimes really just get distressed over. You don't always get the results you want, but that doesn't mean you stop. You just keep going, and you keep going, and you keep going, and you make the change happen. There are so many levels of government, and I found during this whole process that federal government would say, no, it's a provincial level. Provincial government, no, this is a municipal issue. Municipal, no, this is a provincial. It's like flip-flop. And I'm just like, y'all just need to take control of this situation. We need to get these trucks off the streets. It's a complete distraction to people on the roads. I mean, these images are being displayed on huge trucks, on highways and busy streets. It's terrible. So that's an angle that I would really like to see the province take control of. As for the street signs in our city, I haven't given up on that. Right now it's shut down in London, but that doesn't mean it's going to be shut down forever. Never say never.
Is there more to do? Because that addressed the need of literature coming to your home that was unaddressed and without an envelope. But what about a person's right while traveling through public, especially major intersections near hospitals? There's sometimes larger groups, sometimes smaller groups of what happens in those, or when a sidewalk is blocked. What do we do in those situations? So you kind of nailed part one, but we still had part two, in my opinion, to go through and look at any enhancements that could be made. The question of what can council do for more regulations on graphic images on public property. As that conversation continues, I think there's a really big role for the province to play. London does tend to have a reputation of taking things on and being a leader. I fully recognize that some municipalities like to sit back and watch things unfold. It's always nice to have someone who's gone before you to see what the process is, what public pushback and feedback is going to look like, how to balance it. And also that if London put the work into the research Our public reports are all out there for anyone to look up and review and see the process. Our staff is always willing to address and work with other municipalities in Ontario and across the country.
So attention turned a couple of years ago by. It's a new council now. And by the way, this bylaw, which was replicated in many other jurisdictions, London should be proud that they crafted a bylaw that was adopted by so many other jurisdictions. Now, this came up again in a few years with respect to the large street signs, which is Chapter 2. Not only have they sort of brought something like this to London, Ontario, which is generally thought of as a pretty conservative city, but they put London on the map in terms of being a leader, which is something the city should be very proud of. And this is just going to keep going. The issue might be slightly different, but I think the lesson here is that activism works and public engagement works.
Having the bylaw is a great first step. It should be provincial and federal. It's a very difficult topic to broach because the graphic fetal imagery becomes an abortion discussion very quickly when that's not the discussion. The discussion is the disbursement of unfiltered graphic fetal imagery. And moving forward, I do believe there is a position for it to be implemented on a provincial and federal level where vans are no longer driving up and down Deerfoot in Alberta, displaying these graphic images. It's a great start. I think both Katie and I would agree that it's a wonderful first step, and there are next steps that will be taken.
You know, I was so pleased also to have MPP Peggy Sattler and MPP Teresa Armstrong be co-sponsors of the bill a few times now, and I'm sure they will want to co-sponsor again in the next Parliament. I am so incredibly moved by all the strength of the community, the people who have rallied together, and the people who have worked tirelessly on this cause. Of course, I will do so, in concert with Katie. Ever since I met her is the start of a great friendship, and want to make sure that she's ready, willing, and able to come to Queen's Park and help push for that. I think we can't ever give up.
What do you want to see in the future? What's next step? What's the next chapter?
Piecemeal legislation in this area is exhausting and it's not needed. It's a scary time in North America with what's going on in the United States, and I think we need to be very, very cognizant and don't think that this can't happen here. Don't think that our rights can't be taken away. It's very scary.
I wanted to talk to you about the motivation, the passion, and that obviously stems from your own personal experience. You're a little girl, and it's that driving force, right? And if you could just talk a little bit about how that keeps you in the fight, and even when you take a step back, it's still at the forefront, right? You're still involved, even though you're not maybe as enmeshed in the core of it, right?
Right.
Like that's the goal, is to step back a little, but like that at its core is what keeps you involved, isn't it, your little girl?
My goal has always been to change the graphic images, to outlaw them basically in some capacity. It's the graphic images that are not okay. Every time I drive down the street and see one of those images, I take it very personal. It triggers my trauma. And I don't think that that's fair, and I don't think that that's okay. This is about human decency. This is a nonpartisan issue. This is not about abortion. Am I pro-choice? 100%. Every day, all day, twice on Sunday. I'm pro-choice. But I respect the other people's decisions to make whatever decision they need to make in their life. For them is up to you. I'm not here to tell you what to do with your body or you what to do with your body or anything. You don't get to tell me. You don't get to shame me. These are absolute shame tactics, 100%. These images are there to shame people. If you have an abortion, this is what you're going to do to your baby. That's not okay. It's almost like, I call it bullying. I think it's bullying behavior. And I don't think that we should, as a society, allow this bullying to continue. It needs to stop.
What a beautiful legacy for you, your family, for your little girl, to know that out of heartbreak, out of loss, comes this type of advocacy? And how does that feel to know that, like, part of her legacy, your legacy with her, that it has grown into something that's so impactful?
So when I lost Kylie, I went through a lot of emotions, one of them being guilt. What did I do? I did this wrong. I colored my hair and I didn't know I was pregnant. That's what made her sick. I drank a Coke. I didn't know I was pregnant. That's what made her sick. I didn't take enough folic acid. I made her sick. It was all I lived with for years. And for me to turn that kind of guilt around and try to use her existence for some good, I can't even explain it. It's just, yeah, it's a lot. It makes me feel good, obviously, but I wish I didn't have to, but I'm not going to stop. Never say never. Learn that and never give up.